this is going to be the video on miter saw safety. I've got the PowerPoint on just as a reference for me to remember stuff as I teach. This is exactly the same thing I teach off of. I'm just making a video out of it in case we have to do virtual for some time. And if I get interrupted, you know, somebody comes to the door or something, I may have to cut it, pause it, and put it together. But this is the miter saw. The miter saw is primarily used for cross cutting. Cross cutting is when you're cutting across the grain. So every piece of wood, I'm going to grab a piece of wood real fast. Every piece of wood has grain. I don't know if you can see this, but the grain in this board is running long ways. So if we wanted to cut this board to length, we would have to cut it crossways. All right. So cross cutting is this way. Rip cutting is cutting with the grain. So if I tell you to rip something down, you do that on a table saw. If you're going to cross cut it, you're going to cut it across the grain this way. All right. Parts of the miter saw. There's a picture up here. I'm going to use the actual miter saw. So miter saw parts. Hopefully you can see this from all the way back there. This right here is going to be the base. All right. This is where you're going to set your piece of wood. So if you took a piece of wood, you're going to set your piece of wood like so. All right. That's where it's going to sit. You've also got your fence. Your fence is what you push it up against. That way you've got it. This makes a 90-degree angle. That way it's got something to hold your wood in place when you push it up against your fence. Your fence can move. If you go up this side, this particular one moves. All right, so you can slide your fence up and down. And leave it in the middle. The miter saw, the word miter, just means angle. All right, and the most common angle that you guys, myself included, that everyone cuts on is 0. All right, so we are on a 0-degree angle, which is just a straight cut. So we've got 0 here. If you lift up this lock here, push down on this thumb, you can turn this, and it will lock into, you know, let's say a 45-degree angle. If you want to cut a 45, you can lock it into. There are common angles. I don't know if you can hear it clicking, but when it does it, those little clicks, those are common angles. 15 is a common angle. 30, 45, 22 and a half are all common angles that you're going to cut. All right, because if you put two 22 and a halves together, you get a 45-degree angle. If you put two 45s together, you get a 90-degree angle. All right. You've got a handle here. This particular saw has a light on it. All right, you can turn the light on right up here. It says XPS. There is a little switch that you can turn the light off on. The light is designed to give you a shadow of the blade. The light is not designed to help you see. The light produces a shadow on the lumber so that you can tell where the blade is going to cut. And I'm going to lift the guard up and get it out of the way. But right here is the shadow on the wood so that you can tell where the blade is going to cut exactly. All right, you have an upper blade guard. The upper blade guard is stationary, meaning it doesn't move. The lower blade guard is retractable. That way, whenever you pull this down, it folds out of the way. All right? We're going to move this piece of wood. Your trigger is here. All right, we're not going to pull it yet. When you pull this down, there is right under the W and D wall on the side of the motor, there's a pin. If you push that pin in, it locks this in place. That is not for safety purposes, but it is more so for transportation purposes. In case you have to pick it up by this handle, you can pick the saw up, pick it where you want, and the saw isn't moving around because it's spring loaded. All right. There's also another feature. This is a sliding miter saw. Not all miter saws have this, but this one is a pretty nice miter saw. It has a slide feature. All right. This is for cutting wider boards. So let's say that you've got like a 2x12 that you need to cut. If you just chop straight down like this, it's not going to cut all the way through the board. If you're going to use the slide feature, all right, on this, the teeth, the blade is spinning this direction, in towards the fence. The teeth are always going to spin in towards the fence. So you're going to start out, start your saw, go down, slide in. All right, so if you're using the slide feature, you're going to start out away from the saw, push in towards the saw. So the slide feature is just for cutting wider boards. There's a set screw right under, there's the word DeWalt right here. There's a set screw here. If you will turn that set screw, it will keep this from sliding and it will not slide out. So if you want to lock that in place, you can. This is also a dual bevel miter saw. There's a big handle in the back here. It's a large handle, 3-prong handle. You can tilt it to whatever degree. There are several degrees here that you can tilt it to. So that's just a general overview of the saw, the parts of the saw. This is a relatively safe piece of equipment. This particular saw was sitting on a stand. This stand is actually collapsible, and these right here slide out so that you can put longer pieces of lumber. You know, if you've got a 12-foot piece of lumber, you're going to need to support it out beyond just the miter saw here. So this is what these arms are for. You can slide these arms in or out and support your longer piece of lumber if you need to. I'm trying to think if I forgot any features. Like I said, this stand is collapsible, so you can actually pick this up and it will collapse all the way down to the floor, and you can roll it around. All right. This stand costs roughly $200. The saw is roughly $600. They actually make this in a battery operated saw now as well. So as far as parts go, that's where all of your parts are at. How you make all of your adjustments, and we're going to get started with the safety part. Turn this slide on. All right, miter saw. Here's just 2 pictures. There's that battery powered saw I told you about. All right, one of the things that we've got to talk about is cutting. All right, when you're cutting with a saw, you have to cut on the waste side of the line. All right, you're always going to cut on the waste side of the line. Waste meaning the piece that you're not going to use. All right, so hopefully you can see this in the PowerPoint. Here is my cut line. This is the wrong way to cut. This is your blade. This is your piece of lumber. If this blade were to come down on that line, it would take a little bit of lumber or lumber out here. It would take a little bit of wood out here, and your board would end up too short. This is the right way to cut. You've got your piece of lumber here, you've got your line here, and your saw blade is on the waste side. That way I'm keeping this over here. My board doesn't end up too short. All right? So just to give an example, I don't have an example. We may do that in just a minute. I'll do that towards the end. But you want to cut on the waist. Now, when I say the waist side of the line, like I said, let's say you got a 12-foot board, and I only need 2 foot of it. So the 10-foot side would be the waist side of that line. We're not going to throw away a 10-foot board. All right? Student has on PPE and safety glasses. PPE is personal protective equipment. Safety glasses keep, small chunks of wood. I have seen this happen. Small chunks of wood get cut off by the blade. The small chunk is laying there. The next couple teeth around on the saw blade grab that piece of wood and sling it up against the wall. So this thing really can turn something into a projectile if a small piece of wood gets cut off, and it also keeps you from sawdust in your eyes. Sorry. Pretty good. Correctly measure the wood, mark it blank, whatever measurement that you got it. So if you're going to mark your wood, you're going to correctly measure it out to whatever length you want it to first, and then mark the wood, and we just talked about cutting on the waist side of the line. All right, I don't know if you can see in this picture, all right, that blade is on the waist side of that line. There's your line. All of the blade is to the right of the line. This is my waist side, this is my keep side. What I like to do, just a good force of habit, is to put an X on the side of the line that I want to keep, because if I am the cut guy at a job site, and I mark my wood, all right, and I go hand it to somebody, and he's going to cut it, he doesn't know which side of the line to cut. So my standard practice is, if I'm going to make a line, make my line, put my X, that way he knows to cut on the side of the line where the X is. Number 3, make sure everyone is clear of the area in general. Whenever you are cutting, if I'm going to be cutting here and I'm going to be cutting a piece of wood, I don't need anybody to bump into me and shove my hand into the blade while I'm cutting. So just in general, you want to make sure that your area is clear. You don't have anybody horseplaying around you. You don't have anybody that can bump into you. The most common thing that happens is, somebody will be carrying a piece of wood like this, and they won't be paying attention. It'll be 10 foot long. They'll swing like this, and they'll hit somebody, right? And if they swing like this and somebody's here, they bump into them, they shove their hand into the blade, you end up with problems. Number 4, make sure the miter saw guard is properly functioning. Functioning just means that it's on there and it works. This one retracts like it should, so if you pull it down, it retracts out of the way, and when you let it back up, it retracts back into place. So this one does function. Number 5, make sure the wood is free of curves and warps. This piece of wood is actually a pretty good straight piece of wood. If you look down, this side, both sides, a pretty straight piece of wood. Doesn't have any knots, nails, anything like that. We do have wood, however, that you get it and it does this number. And what will end up happening if it is extremely warped, and by extremely I mean, if it's touching the fence here, and it's touching the fence over here, you end up with a gap of, let's say, more than, maybe a ½ inch over here. Wood that is warped puts the fibers, it puts the grain of the wood, the fibers in the wood under tension. And when you cut a warped piece of wood, it releases that tension, and that's where you'll get your saw will do something what they call kickback. And kickback is when the saw grabs and it jumps, and it'll jump. Kickback on the miter saw is not near as bad as, let's say, kickback on a table saw or a circular saw, but it's still something that you want to watch out for. All right, so you want your piece of wood to be contacting the fence over here and to be contacting the fence over here on both sides of the blade. You want your wood to be in contact, and you don't want to have a gap. Do not cut any wood that is shorter than 8 inches in length. So the reason that I tell students is, now 8 inches for me is an arbitrary number. It's not super arbitrary, but it's semi-arbitrary that I came up with. Because if you look at your hand is roughly, the hand portion without your thumb sticking out is about 4 inches wide. Your hand's about 4 inches wide. You have to hold your piece of wood down whenever you're cutting with your hand. If you have to hold it down, that's going to take up roughly 4 inches. You've only got 4 inches left, which puts, if it's any shorter than 8 inches, it puts your hand way too close to the blade. So when you're cutting, you want to make sure if it's shorter than 8 inches, throw it in the trash receptacle and get a new piece of wood, a longer piece of wood. If you have to make that cut on, let's say, a short piece of lumber, you can get me and I will help you out. All right? Securely lock the saw in place at the correct degree or angle. This needs to be locked down. All right? That is unlocked. Pushing it down is locked. All right? And if you want it on a different angle, go to that angle and lock it in place. The reason that I say this, that I have this on there as a safety thing, is if that's not locked in place as you cut, this one is still pretty good because it's a newer saw. Some of them you can move back and forth, and they will move as you're cutting. And you don't want the saw to be moving left and right as you cut. And we've got some older saws that will do that. This one's still in pretty good shape. The teeth hadn't worn out, so you don't have to worry about it. Wood should be placed securely against the fence on the left and right side of the blade. So just making sure your wood is touching here, wood is touching over here. You don't have a big gap back here. All right, against the fence. Make sure the blade is cutting on the designated line. I put on here just to see if students will catch it. You actually do not want your blade on the line. You want your blade beside of the line, and specifically on the waist side of the line. Clear of any knots and nails. So you can actually cut through knots. You need to do it slowly. Knots are hard spots in the wood where a limb was on the tree. So just cut through those slowly. Now, if it's got nails in it, you do not want to cut through a nail. Nails do two things. They dull the blade, all right, because it's not designed to cut through metal. The other thing that nails do is if your blade is coming around and it cuts off the nail falls down and lays right there. The next couple of teeth that are coming through, pick up that loose scrap of nail and throw it. And then you've got a flying nail that becomes a projectile. Number 10, hold the wood in place with your left hand against the fence at least 4 inches through from the blade. So, whenever you're cutting, I said this just a second ago, your hand has to hold the wood down. All right? And your hand needs to be at least 4 inches from where the blade is going to cut. All right? That gives you plenty of room, all right, between the blade and your hand to keep you safe from cutting off your fingers. Okay? Another big thing is making sure that you hold the wood in place. All right, I had a student one time, and this happens. Smaller pieces of wood are more dangerous than larger pieces of wood because they don't have the weight to hold themselves in place. I had a student after we had got done doing this, after he had taken a safety exam. All right, he come up here like this, a small piece of wood, wasn't very heavy. Didn't hold it in place and just decided to cut. Well, the wood was so light that the teeth on the saw grabbed a hold of the piece of wood and chunked it, and it about hit another student who was using the other miter saw. So just keep that in mind that you have to hold this piece of wood in place, and your hand needs to be at least 4 inches away from the blade while you're doing so. Start the saw before making contact with the wood. So if you're going to make a cut, I did not bring my speed square and pencil, and I should have. If you're going to make a cut, once you make your line, all right, you're going to hold this. You're going to put your safety glasses on. I put my sunglasses on. The saw, the blade has to be turning before touching the wood. All right, so I'm holding it in place. Everything's safe. I'm on my line. Let off the trigger once you cut through the wood.